British Prime Minister Theresa May in a race to convince the British public and harder still, the Parliament to back the Brexit deal that was reached with the EU yesterday. May spoke to Parliament today, warning against going back to square one.
I can say to the House with absolute certainty that there is not a better deal available. And my fellow leaders were very clear on that themselves yesterday. The British people want us to get on with a deal that honours the referendum and allows us to come together again as a country whichever way we voted. This is that deal.
Joining me now, one of the architects of Brexit, Fox News contributor Nigel Farage. Nigel, do you agree that there's not a better deal out there and that this deal honours the referendum itself?
Absolutely not. I mean, the only good news from this deal is that we will leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on March 29th, 2019. That's the good bit. So you would think, wouldn't you, after 25 years of campaigning for this and leading the charge for this, that I'd be trying to get corks out of bottles now and partying and celebrating, but I'm not. This is not a deal. It's a capitulation. What she's done is to give away a huge sum of money, somewhere between 40 and 60 billion sterling, in return for a 3-year period over which we'll have no control over our borders, no control over our laws, we'll be locked inside the European Union's rule book, but without having any say on any new laws that come in that period of time, which of course is taxation without representation. Then at the end of that 3 years, we can only leave that set of arrangements if the other side agree. It's rather like walking into prison and saying to the prison warders, "What I want to leave, you will let me go, won't you?" It's a dreadful deal. It's the worst deal in history. It makes us even weaker as a nation. It diminishes our sovereignty even further. And it is, frankly, a betrayal of what people voted for in that Brexit referendum.
Do you feel she was more intimidated by Angela Merkel and Macron than she was by, perhaps having survived a lack of confidence vote?
I think the real problem here is that she voted Remain, not Leave. She's never really believed in it. And she wants to give us Brexit in name only. She wants to keep us tied to the European Union. She now makes vague promises of what might happen next. She is putting to the House of Commons a legally binding document that promises for the future absolutely nothing. That is not a negotiation, it's a surrender.
What do you make of, for instance, Macron and his, the UK fisheries, for instance? When I look at it as an outsider, It seems absurd to me the things that the EU are demanding from the UK to leave this deal.
That's because we've signed up to this backstop arrangement that could kick in 3 years' time. And what we saw from President Macron yesterday was the first issuance of a bullying order saying, we're going to get our fish, we want to continue catching fish in British waters, and if you don't let us, we will keep you trapped inside of this. And I expect, Charles, over the course of the next 3 years, to see lots and lots of threats and demands made upon us, and people will realise that this is the worst deal in history. I do believe it'll get voted down in the House of Commons.
Right.
If it doesn't, and it gets to the European Parliament, where the final vote is, I promise you, I'll vote against it.
I saw a piece from you with respect to UKIP bringing in Tommy Robinson as a personal special advisor to current UKIP leader, and we heard Theresa May talking about going to square one. Are the Brexiteers prepared to do that, considering it looks like there's a lot of internal turmoil already going on there?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think UKIP does have, a party which I led for a long time, does now have a bit of turmoil. Tommy Robinson may be seen by some to be outspoken, keen to talk about issues around Islam that others aren't. But, it's very difficult to get somebody involved in elected politics who's been to prison repeatedly and who attracts some pretty unattractive people around him. So there are issues, there are splits in the Brexit camp, that is certainly true. But I do think there'll be a mobilisation to stop this deal. The question then is what comes next.
Yeah.
And are we going to face a situation where we leave with no deal, which is what the legislation says we should do, or are we going to get our political class effectively forcing a second referendum upon us? And that is now, I think, the biggest risk that we face.
Well, Nigel, we I'm for one hoping that the will of the people will be adhered to and listened to by the elites. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.